Hello, 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 and welcome to the first official Mindful Insights podcast interview. I'm here today with author Ben Jamison, who has written a book called Church-Free Spirituality, and that is available pretty much anywhere you can buy books, so Amazon, Barnes & Noble, what have you, if you want to go check it out. And so the link to the book is going to be in the description of the video as well as the podcast. And I definitely recommend this book because I didn't read all the way through it, but I did start reading through it. And some of the practices in here and the clarity with which you've written this book, like that was the most impactful part for me, was some of the ways in which you describe the concepts, because it's interesting, like trying to figure out how to tell people what's going on the inside, and sometimes that can be a little tricky to communicate. So I found it really cool that your clarity in this book, like the style of writing is so concise, and you literally just have some really hard hitting, like bam, take that punch in the face.
Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Yes, please do. Please do. It's good. It's good. It's like revelation fodder.
Excellent.
Absolutely. So, so do you have anything that you want to say before we start talking about what we have on our list? Did you want to open with anything?
Well, sure. It's wonderful to be here, to be joining you and all of your viewers and listeners, and to talk about spirituality, which for me is the most important thing we can really be focusing on. Spirituality is oftentimes misidentified with something that's...
Oh, that's okay. My cats bother me in my videos all the time. And then there's the dog. He's on my feet right now. Anyway, yeah, absolutely, talking about spirituality, because that's where everything starts. Quantum physics now has told us that consciousness literally creates form. So really, if we're focusing on anything else, then we're living backwards, aren't we?
Right. Exactly. And it gets even simpler than that, really. We can get into big quantum mechanics stuff, which I think is interesting, and I love playing around in that. But even more simply and more personally, the way we feel and the way we experience the world is based upon what we have in our own consciousness. Mm-hmm. So it's really personal to us and the quality of life that we live. So if we put our attention on this spirituality, which is not woo-woo, mystical, crazy stuff, but is really just working on your own self, we can use that to really enhance the level of our life and come to a place where we have more peace and more joy, and all of that. I know because I did it myself.
Yeah, me too. In process, but yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, and that peace and that being able to live from a place of loving rather than letting everything, because I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but like I know I have from my experience just over the last few months, is there always seems to be drama. There's so much drama everywhere. And then when you take a step back and you start focusing on spirituality and working on yourself, all that just kind of disappears, and you can really live much better and more focused. It's priceless. It's priceless.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. So if we're looking around and we're seeing a whole lot of drama in the world out there, it's because there's a whole lot of drama in here. It's just a reflection of how we're experiencing the world. And so when we see out in the world all this big drama that's really upsetting us, knocking us off our center, that's a great indication to go back inside and do that personal growth work that can help to relieve that suffering, that drama within ourselves. It's not going to necessarily stop all the drama out in the world, but it's going to be a lot less impactful on us in a negative way, which will then allow us to be more powerful as we choose to address it in the way that's right for us.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, so speaking of drama and addressing things, why don't we go ahead and address the elephant, so to speak. So the book is called Church-Free Spirituality. And me personally, I have some kind of trauma with church-going experiences and things like that,
Yeah.
certain experiences. So to me, it was like, oh, yes, all right, awesome, church free. Yes, let's do this, But when I started reading it, it really reminded me that, there's nothing actually wrong with going to church, and it's not anti-church. It's simply
Right.
that the way that church or organized religion is structured doesn't work for some people. So why don't we talk about like some of the key differences between here, let's see. Between spirituality and actual like church-based religion,
Sure.
and then hopefully people can kind of like discern, it's not that it's an anti-church book, it's that
Right.
everyone has their own unique path, so.
Exactly. Exactly. So with religion, religion is a prescribed set of beliefs. It's something that has been set up as this is the box within which you must practice. And you can find a lot of spirituality in there. You can find a lot of good in there. Sometimes the box that holds you in is really great because it helps to focus you on one thing. So there can be a lot of benefit in that. But just because you have a religious practice doesn't necessarily mean you have a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is all about the inner. It's all about the spirit that we have inside of us and how we identify with that more, because that's really the true nature of who we are. So you can have a deep and empowering spiritual practice inside of Catholicism or Judaism or Islam or Buddhism or any of the religious practices out in the world. You can also have a really deep, meaningful spiritual practice without participating in any of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about finding what works for you. And like you said, we all have our own different expression of this because we're each a different person. We can have a lot of similarities in our spirituality and can really support each other on the spiritual practice, but everything is going to be just slightly different for each one of us because it comes through our own consciousness, which is made up of all of our experiences. And so there's no way that you're going to have the same experiences as anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say church free, part of that is because church has damaged a lot of people. And that's not a judgment of church. It's just a statement of the fact that a lot of people come out of religion feeling harmed by it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but still having that desire to have a spiritual connection, to feel what they were going to church to get. So this is a way to continue that, to deepen that practice if church doesn't work for you. Now, if church does work for you and you love your Catholic church or your Baptist church or whatever it is, and you love it, great. You can still have a deep spiritual practice within that. You can still look at the tools in this book, which probably aren't being taught in your church, not because they are against them at all, but not a lot of places really teach deep, meaningful forgiveness practices, right? We all say, hey, you should do forgiveness work, and then never say how to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Really
The how part.
Yeah. A practical guide on how to take 9 spiritual practices that are really commonplace when you look at them, but we often overlook them, and start practicing them right away, just to really get deeper into that truth of who we are as spirit and all of the delight that awaits us there.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh man, and it amazes me so much, like the people that I've gotten to interact with now, like it hasn't just been you reaching out, there's been a couple other people too, and just the passion and the amount of love that is being expressed is just incredible to me. It's amazing. So, and I think that's the whole point. And really, when you look at religion, they talk about love too and forgiveness and all of these principles, but it's a little bit more complex in practice, like from what I've found doing my own inner work, it's kind of weird to try and describe, to learn the inner workings and then describe how it works and try and have it click for other people, because even if you understand what's going on within yourself, trying to explain it to someone else and have them understand, so I think that might be part of the reason why religion is not it doesn't reach the level of depth for some people.
Yeah, and that's another really good point too, is that, it doesn't matter who is teaching or what they're teaching. Nobody can tell you what is right for you, especially spiritually. So, I share a lot of great ideas in church-free spirituality about how to practice, about ways to do gratitude and love practice and compassion and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, the right way to do these practices is the way that works for you, not the way somebody else says to do them. So the good thing to do with spirituality and with everything is to not take anything on face value. Don't believe something just because somebody said you should or you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Take it inside, put it against the wisdom of your heart, see what that comes up with for you. Try it out. Does it work? Great, keep it. If not, great, adjust it or get rid of it and find something else, because it is uniquely yours and uniquely you.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing more important than this, so it's not worth letting somebody else dictate to us what we can or cannot have as part of a spiritual practice, and that then limiting us in our expression of that light and that love that we are. Because when you look at the drama in the world, the one thing that can really help with that is us being more light-filled and more loving than we have been so far.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what's been kind of striking me too lately is that if every single person as an individual would do this work for themselves, it doesn't have to be for anybody else. You're just doing it for you so you can be happier and healthier and your best version, as Ralph Smart says. So I mean, when you really look at it, oh crap, I lost my train of thought. Hang on. I hate it when that happens, because every once in a while it'll come through and I'll start the sentence and then by the middle of it, it's gone.
I know how that goes. Ralph Smart.
Yeah, you become your best version, you become your greatest version. And if every single individual were to do that, and even the Dalai Lama says if every child were to start meditating, then we would see way less violence in the world within one generation. It would absolutely impact the world. And I find that the naysayers, the people who are all, oh, that's a bunch of crap, whatever, they're the ones who've never tried. So
Right.
Coming back full circle to actually trying things out, that's the most important part, because if you don't try it, then you'll never know if it works or not. If I had never tried meditation, then I wouldn't be here. I would be completely somewhere else, And 6 months in, 3 months in, I think my thoughts quieted down and I kind of was able to, okay, nope, you are under my control now. You're only talking if I want you to, you know what I mean? So and that's one of the first steps. So I wanted to ask you about that too, just kind of as an aside, about how long, because I've come across this whole monkey mind and people thinking too much and thoughts racing, and this is the playground of self-deprecation. So I was kind of wanting to ask you for your input about do you have a general idea or any experience with maybe other people for how long it might take someone to quiet the so-called monkey mind?
How long are you planning on being in the body?
Until I'm dead.
I think that is, at some point, maybe when we reach that ideal enlightened state, that monkey mind won't be there. But until then, I think probably always going to be running. The trick is that we get to the point to where we don't let it run us. You know how you can be doing cleaning or something, and you put on some music in the background and you're going about doing your cleaning, and then all of a sudden you hear a song that you haven't heard for a while and you think, I don't remember what the last 6 songs were that played. I can't recall having heard them. They were playing, you just didn't hear them. You were focused on something else. They weren't impacting you at all. So I think to a degree that the more we try to push away the monkey mind and kill it and silence it and do all of that, the more it's going to be even more active.
Oh yeah.
The key is just getting it to the place where we don't pay attention to it anymore, where it doesn't really bother us, or, and it can go from it bothering us all the time to us hearing it and saying, well, thank you for sharing. And the me of today is focusing on this now. And just going forth and doing what was ours to do, regardless of the monkey mind. But yeah, there is no quick fix. I like how you mentioned that it took you about 6 months of practicing meditation before you started to notice a difference.
And that was every day. That was every single morning, you know. It
Yep.
was, yeah, and it was months. And I mean, it made a difference within the first several days, just in my calmness and in my ability to pay attention, and you know what I mean? But it does. You have to stick with it. It is a practice. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me, was because I'm so unstructured. I'm so all over the place, you know, that practicing anything was kind of a daunting, intimidating, you know. Oh my gosh, I have to have a habit now. Ew. But then once I started, it was just, and now I can't imagine, you know, like I wake up from time to time and don't hop on the yoga mat, but that's very few and far between these days. I absolutely love my morning yoga and meditation, and that's the foundation of my own spiritual practice, just because that's like, it's super fast. I don't feel like I'm quote unquote wasting time, like I'm putting hours into something, and you know what I mean?
Yep.
And 10, 20, 30 minutes is more than enough to really help you feel balanced, you know, throughout your whole day. So I don't think I'll ever give it up again.
Yeah, well, and too, you know, you look back on 6 months and say, oh, it took me 6 months, and now the mind is starting to be quiet and I'm able to control it a little bit more. 10 years from now, you'll look back and go, oh man, 10 years ago, this is what I thought the height of meditation was, and now it's so much bigger than that. And then 20 years after that, it'll be the same thing. Yeah. It's an ever deepening experience. So it's never something we're done with, which to me is incredibly exciting. If you go and start meditating or any of these spiritual practices, and you go from where you are having not practiced them at all to getting a little bit of good out of it and thinking, man, I can't believe I got this much good. And then a year later, it's even better. And then a year later, it's even better. And then you think 50 years down the road, I'm going to be having grown every single year over and over and over again with no limit to the amount of growth that I can have from doing this. It starts to blow your mind and make it even more exciting to actually jump in and do the practice.
Absolutely. Well, and that kind of brings me to the next talking point. I wanted to ask you about the cyclical nature of pretty much everything. I mean, literally everything has a cyclical nature. Even time, if we were able to perceive its structure, really, it would be more of a spirally thing rather than, you know, straight line. So everything is in cycles. And I started really thinking about this recently, and something clicked, because it was like, rather than looking back on my past according to what month it was or what year it was or whatever, I've started looking back, thinking about, okay, well, when was the last time that I did this behavior?
Mm-hmm.
And then that way you can kind of, because the time period itself doesn't actually matter. It's the cycles of behavior. It's the cycles of habits. It's different various relationships where you kind of tend to repeatedly attract the same things. You know, those kinds of cycles are what I've been paying attention to now. And I've noticed that time just doesn't, time's kind of a whatever. It's like an aside, the measurement of time. Now, we live in a situation where nobody actually works outside the home, so it's easy for us to get lost, you know. But I noticed that it's easier to recognize patterns, excuse me, if you're not focused on the time period, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that is often said in spirituality is that life is an upward, forward, progressive spiral. So we start here, and then it spirals up, and we come back to the place where we were before. It looks the same, but we're at a higher level than we were before. And then we spiral around, and we come back, and again, we're at that same point, but we're higher up on the next rung, and spiral around again and again and again. So even though it looks similar, it might be the same issue, seemingly the same issue, we're addressing it at a much higher level than we were before, as long as we're actually going in and doing the work. So doing that work, doing that spiritual growth work is what makes it the spiral upward and forward and progressive. Otherwise, it's just a circle and we spin and spin and spin and spin.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but so the cyclical nature of spiritual practices, you know, you're going to start where you are always. Start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start, right? From the 7. So wherever we start, meditation is a great example. You may start in a meditative practice doing 1 minute a day, setting a timer so that you don't have to worry about the time, and 1 minute a day. And then after a while, that'll start to feel comfortable. So now you've completed that cycle. You move it up to 2 minutes a day. And then after a while, that'll become comfortable. You move it up to 5 minutes, to 10 minutes, to 20 minutes. You're doing 20 minutes of meditation twice a day, and it's going great. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, it just doesn't work for you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do? Well, it's time to up-level your practice. Maybe it's about adding a little more time. Maybe it's about slightly adjusting your technique. Maybe it's just about sitting in the meditation and not judging it, and just letting it be what it is, and allowing it the time to work out whatever's being worked out so that you settle back into it again. But with everything, regardless of what the spiritual practice is, for a while, it will be working for you great the way it is. And then you're going to grow. And since you're growing, your practice has to grow as well.
Yeah.
We can do that consciously. Job stuff is a great example. How many people have the inkling that they need to leave a job and don't do it and don't do it and don't do it and don't do it, and then it's removed? And that's a whole lot more painful of a way to get to the same result that you knew you needed to have months before.
And it usually gets worse and worse and worse until, because that's life in the universe trying to communicate with you. Mm-hmm. And I actually just did a post about this recently. About listening, about paying attention to what life is trying to tell you. So if you're being chased out of a job, or if you're having a horrible experience and it just keeps getting worse and it keeps repeating and it keeps getting worse, and you're suffering and your suffering's getting worse, then it might be time to just say goodbye.
Mm-hmm. But it's our choice. We can choose to say goodbye, or eventually, if this is something that is not for our highest good, it will be taken away. And that can feel painful. That can sometimes feel worse. But the good news is, even though that free fall is a little uncomfortable, it's a very creative time. It's a time that allows us to really look at what we are trying to bring into our life and into our experience, and then go after that. And so having that time of seeking, of looking for what's my new next, what's the next thing, what is it going to be that I add to my spiritual practice that helps to resettle this? What's the thing that's going to help get me to the next level? Whatever it is, that exploration time is a huge time of learning and growth. And once we get through that, once we find the next thing, the adjustment that we need to make to our practice, whatever it might be, and things settle back down to that status quo where everything is working again, it'll be working at such a higher level than we ever thought possible. And then once we figure out, oh, hey, this happens all the time. And I might be at the status quo for a day, and I might be at the status quo for 10 years. No idea how long it's going to last. But if I pay attention and I recognize when, things are starting to shift again, maybe I should start looking for my new next right now before this gets taken away forcibly. Or maybe I should just let this go, in the consciousness of knowing that I'm at this stage in the cycle. Here we go. I know what this is like because I've been there before. Now let's get through it a lot quicker. Knowing it, accepting it, allows us to move through it quicker than resisting and pushing away and not allowing that growth to happen.
Right. Yeah. It's always better to just kind of let it move through you. It's the steps or whatever kind of remind me of the grieving process, or process of acceptance. And it's interesting to kind of go through, and when you do start recognizing the cycles, because then you're like, oh yeah, this is just like that one time. And it makes it even makes it less emotionally traumatic when you start seeing it that way, because Absolutely. You're like, because then instead of being like, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? Life sucks. Life is horrible. Why do things keep going wrong? Or in my case, it was dealing with a bunch of people who were not necessarily the greatest to me, and I was like, well, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person. I try to be nice to everyone, but that's not the point. The point is growth. So, and there's always something, we can get into all kinds of topics here, but there's always something that's being reflected back to you. And It takes a while. It takes a while, just like the cyclical process of the spiritual awakening, uncovering all the little layers of meaning happens during those cycles too, like in conjunction. So it's just fascinating to me because I loved seeing how things work.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, being aware of it is the key, because once you're aware of it, you stop resisting it. And instead of looking at, oh my God, this is so terrible and awful, why is it happening to me? You look at it instead as, oh, this is great. I'm in a growth cycle. And every time I've been in a growth cycle, I've come out better on the other side of it. So let's go find the good that this has for me now. I can't wait. And that energy, that attitude, that consciousness is going to completely shift the experience.
Right, exactly, exactly. When you look at it from a learning, growing, I mean, and it's not going to necessarily make it easy peasy or anything, but it definitely makes crazy times a lot less crazy, or a less, I don't know. You gotta roll with the punches. Rolling with the punches is like the best expression, because sometimes life literally does punch you several times in a row, and you just gotta go with it and be like, okay, what purpose does this serve? What can I use this for? I love it. It's awesome.
So another way to look at it is, pain is required, suffering is optional. So
Yes, that's good. I like that.
very simply, you break a finger, it's going to hurt. Now, if you resist it, if you think, oh, how terrible and awful this is, how could I have broken my finger? This is going to ruin my life. I'm not going to be able to do this thing. What if it doesn't heal right? What if it doesn't this? And oh my God, I don't have the resources to get this healed, and all this and all that. That's all the suffering. And that is not required at all.
Yeah, very, very true.
Growth also is optional. Pain is required, growth is optional. We're going to go through experiences that are uncomfortable. It's part of the human condition. We're going to go through things that we don't necessarily want to go through. It's how we relate to those issues that is the issue, not the issue itself. So if we relate to it as a growth opportunity, what's the benefit in this for me? Yeah, this sucks, but it's in my experience to handle, which means that I am fully capable of handling it. So I'm going to handle it and grow through it. That then removes the resistance. It removes the suffering. It still sucks, but we get through it a lot quicker, a lot easier. It sucks less, and we actually get the lesson that we're trying to learn from it. Whereas if we don't do that, if we resist it, we're going to go through the issue, and we're not going to get the lesson, and so we're going to go through the issue again.
Yeah.
And then we're not going to get the lesson, and we're going to go through the issue again and again and again until we do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Oh man, and I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in several other people's lives, and it's one of those things where it's kind of tough not to say, like, you've probably had the experience where you're dealing with people who are maybe, going through an awakening or going through a difficult time, and they aren't recognizing it. And all you want to do is just be like, look, this is what's happening. But they may not see it that same way. So really, you just have to, I hope you're okay.
Yeah, that's that compassion piece. Yeah, and there's a whole chapter in the book on compassion for yourself and for others, and how to really sit with compassion. Compassion being with suffering, but not actually suffering yourself. Like, suffering isn't required, but people go through it. And so for us, and we go through it. And so to be able to sit with that suffering, to be sort of that light in the darkness, and just sit there with them is so incredibly powerful. Recognizing that, I get that you're suffering. I also get that you don't have to, but you are, and it's okay that you are. And I'm just going to be here and not judge your suffering. And I'm going to see the truth about you and love you and know that you are perfect and that you are going to come out of this better than ever before. And so I can be that energy battery that allows you to do the work that you do. But yeah, compassion is hugely important, especially for ourselves. I mean, we are worse to ourselves than we are to anybody else.
We are. It's so crazy. We're more likely to talk horribly to ourselves than we are to our own, to anybody, to anybody. Oh man. Yeah. That's so sad. Hopefully that, hopefully people start realizing that, because we're so programmed and conditioned to think negatively.
Mhm.
Everybody's always so worried about everything. There's so many things to worry about and be scared of, and we pick up on all this stuff all our lives, and it's not beneficial. It's not constructive. Some caution, sure. It's just like a realistic pessimism, or functional pessimism or something, versus just constantly being a doomsday person.
Yeah, well, and even not necessarily pessimism, but just going to actually seeing things the way they are as a first step, because we're overly pessimistic so often. So to
Yeah.
really step back and say, really, what is the situation here really? How
Hmm.
bad is it really? And when we actually do that, when we pull ourselves back and really introspect about it, we'll see that it's not nearly as bad as we thought it was. And
Yeah.
then the next question is to say, so, okay, how is it really? Now, how could it be better? And by asking ourselves those questions, we'll start to see the different things that we can do to improve the situation. I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. I don't know if you're familiar with
I
him.
love Tony Robbins. Yeah.
But yeah, the quality of your life is the quality of your questions, is one of his sayings. And so, yeah, asking ourselves, how can I see this better? How can I improve this? What's here for me to learn? Instead of, why is this happening to me? You ask your consciousness why this is happening to me, that monkey mind is going to give you 150,000 reasons of why you're such a horrible, terrible person that this is happening to you.
Yep.
If you ask your inner wisdom, how can I learn and grow through this? You will get some nuggets of wisdom that say, well, you can learn compassion here. You can learn loving here. See what's really going on. See how you thought this was the case, but then you got more information and it became something completely different. How is
Yeah.
that expanding your understanding? So really, yeah, looking at those questions is going to be a huge differentiator in the quality of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we touched earlier on, yeah, I love Tony Robbins too, by the way. I almost got to see him last year, but it fell through because we could not find parking. I had will call tickets, but
Mhm.
we couldn't find parking like at all. It was ridiculous. It was so packed, and I was just, is it really going to be worth it to walk 2-3 miles in order to get there?
Yeah, I did his Firewalk seminar, and you're only supposed to go through the line once. I went through it 4 times. I walked on the fire, I got back in line. I did it again, I
That's
got back in line. I did it
awesome.
again, I got back in line.
That's awesome. Good for you. Congrats. Yeah, that must have been some experience, huh?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
That's awesome. Well, so we had touched on spiritual practices being as unique as the people that practice them, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So, and I guess this kind of is just touching on the same thing. I was gonna say something about what would you say to someone who is wanting more, but those outside of them tell them you're not allowed to pick and choose what you want? How
I
would
would
you
say, I
how
would
would
say,
you
thank you
allow
for
that
sharing.
person to kind of like encourage them to kind of open up their perception anyway, despite being told they're not supposed to?
Uh, just to do it, to open up your perception anyway. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your opinion. Thank you. And then go about finding what works for you. And we will run into this. You'll run into this no matter what the religion or philosophy is. You will run into people who think, for them, their experience is that you stay on this path because this is the best path and this is the quickest and easiest way to get there and it's the right one. And that may be the case for them, but that doesn't mean it's the case for you. And if
Hmm.
something isn't working for you, then it's in your best interest to explore other things. I was brought up in a wonderful spiritual philosophy that's very open. I have pieces from multiple organizations that are part of my spiritual practice. I have ideas from Judaism, from Hinduism, from Buddhism, from New Thought spirituality, from Christianity, from Islam, all working in my spiritual practice because something in them stood out and resonated for me.
Right. Yeah.
And this is, demonstration is the only authority. Nobody outside of you is an authority unless you make them one. So what I mean by demonstration is the only authority is if I tell you, hey, if you do these 3 things, your life is going to get better. And you do these 3 things and your life does not get better, there's no demonstration there. I am not an authority. If I say you do these 3 things and your life gets better, and you do these 3 things and your life gets better, then the authority behind that is that your life got better. And that's not going to necessarily work for everybody. Yeah. So and especially if somebody, and this is just me, this is just my thing, I resist boxes like you wouldn't believe. I try to take those personality profiles, and it takes me so long to do the questions because I find all of the intricacies about, well, it can't be either or, there's all this gray area in here, and then you try to put a box of this personality and you're wrong and I'm not a box, right? So personally, I resist boxes. But so for me, whenever somebody says, oh, you can't do this, you have to believe this way, man, it's my consciousness, it's not yours. I'm the only person who's responsible for my consciousness. I'm the only authority inside my own head. And so thank you for sharing, but it's my life. I can't live my life your way. I can't live your spiritual practice, just like you can't live mine. And for me personally, somebody who does not allow the room for people to have their own individual personal experience of spirituality is not somebody I spend time with.
Right.
For me, it's just, and that's not a judgmental thing. That's not a bad thing. It's just we don't resonate.
Yeah. Not on the same wavelength. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to.
Like not going into the anti-church thing. For some people that works. And if it works for you to have this box that you stay in and focus inside of this box, then by all means, love the box, enjoy it, have the deep, meaningful spiritual practice. That's the important thing. Not the practice, not the box, not any of that. What's important is that it works for you, is that it connects you with your spiritual self, that it helps you be more loving and more joyful and more peaceful and more kind and bring more gratitude into your life. That's all that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that I think is kind of what people are starting to learn now, rather than focusing on the rules of a particular church, or you're not allowed to do this because blah, blah, blah. Now I think people are starting to really look at things more deeply, because everybody, I feel like as a collective, everybody's unsatisfied. You know what I mean? People are generally just looking for happiness. Happiness is what everybody wants, and it's not out there, it's never out there. And it comes from having a deeper existence, having a more meaningful day to day. And a lot of that has to do with spiritual practice, in my opinion. So yeah.
The thing you are seeking is more of yourself. It's not anything outside. Unfortunately, Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain proved that recently. The external world does not bring us happiness at all. Yeah. The happiness exists within us. The happiness is who we are. To the degree that we shut that off by believing in ideas that are not aligned with us, by not doing the work to clear our judgments, by not doing the spiritual growth work, that's to the degree we cut ourselves off from happiness. But happiness is not something we get, it's something we are.
Yep,
and our job
absolutely.
is to uncover the blocks that we have placed in the way of that happiness. Consciously or unconsciously, mostly unconsciously.
It's all about tapping in.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's see. We are at 38 minutes, and we still have a little bit of time. How are you feeling? Do you need some time before your next appointment?
I could talk about this stuff all day.
Sweet, me too. All right, cool. Let's see if we can't make it through the last, there's like 3 more, so let's see. Let's talk about redefining labels. and redefining things for yourself so that way, I
Mhm.
love this part because I recently did this with the term unconditional love. I didn't know what love was before. And
Oh,
so the second I redefined love for myself, everything in my life started falling apart to bring more of the actual love, not the fake stuff, you know?
mhm. Yeah, so words are just symbols. We often forget that, and the meaning that is behind symbols, we get to choose what that means.
Hmm.
So my favorite example of that in my life works well if somebody is anti-church, even though this is not about anti-church. But the cross, for many people, that is a symbol that brings frustration and anger. And for a long time, that's what it was for me. The problem was my commute to work went past a giant cross on a hill. So
Hmm.
every day I was seeing this symbol that for me said, negativity towards other people, discrimination, justifying bad behavior in the terms of religion. All of these things that are so easy um, to feel when we have things put at us like, oh, you believe differently than me, you're going to hell.
Hmm.
Things of that nature. So anyway, not a good experience driving to work, seeing this symbol that frustrated me so much.
Right.
Well, somebody then reminded me, hey, you get to pick what that symbol means. So what if instead this is a roadmap for growth? So the centerpiece of the cross in an upward direction indicates growing up. At some point, we go through the field of polarities, positive and negative, right and wrong, good and bad. To the degree that we nail ourselves to good and bad and right and wrong, we're going to be stuck and not
Yeah.
grow anymore. But when we take ourselves down off that cross of good, bad, right, and wrong, remaining centered, right in the center of the cross, then we excel through that field of polarity easier and quicker and continue on our growth. So instead of being this thing of, here are all the ways that Christianity has hurt me over my life, it became, a reminder that I need to stay centered, not nail myself to good and bad, right and wrong, not nail myself to these polarities, but just stay centered and focus on that upward direction of growth. And I'm going to get through this a lot easier. So it can become a completely different meaning when we take the time to look at it and say, well, if this meaning that I've been given doesn't really work for me, what would work for me? How do I want to redefine this symbol in such a way that's empowering? And with words and terms as well. A lot of people who have come out of organized religion because it didn't work for them have these definitions of words like God, like heaven and hell and sin and Jesus and all these other terms that are very disempowering and do not work for them. And yet we never stop to think, well, how could I redefine that so it does work for me? What if I looked at it this way instead? Could I re-engage with that idea? Could it become more alive and more meaningful to me if I did that? And so that's devote a whole chapter in the book
Yeah.
looking at those terms and saying, here's another way that we can look at that. But don't, in the words of LeVar Burton, you don't have to take my word for it. Find your word. Find the one that works for you. Find the terminology that says, oh, I get this now. Because again, it's as individual as you are.
Right. And then certain concepts and things too, that you have to look at it from several different angles and perspectives sometimes in order to even understand and come up with your own perspective. So it's like and that's an ongoing process too. Completely
Mm-hmm.
ongoing. Redefining words that trigger you usually is, kind of words or symbols that trigger you. That's a challenge. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but really, once you do that, you have this whole other foundation. And when I started doing this, I really started like stupid little things like those little platitudes and sayings, that are all over the place that seem all dumb and like, oh yeah, whatever. They make so much more sense when you start uncovering the different levels at which they make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I never joke around about, oh, that's such a stupid saying or whatever, because I know that there's some truth to it and there's probably hidden layers.
Yeah. And like, it's again back to that cyclical nature, right? We're going to find a definition of a word or a symbol that works really well for us. And then after a little while, that is going to expand. It's going to change again and again and again, particularly if you're talking about a word like love or an idea like God or spirit or the universe, whatever word is your favorite. Those things are infinite.
Yeah.
And so what we understand about them now will be different a year from now and different a year from now. It will continue to grow and expand and shift. So it's never a done deal. It's never locked in. And like I said before, to me, that's exciting. It's
Yeah.
exciting that I constantly get to have new understandings, new ideas, new experiences that are bigger and better than that I've had before because I'm dedicated to this spiritual practice.
Right. And I found that it becomes more exciting when you have a good foundation of spiritual practice. When you're just kind of going through a bunch of stuff, and there's a lot of upheaval and stuff, you tend to feel really tired, and then you add your spirit. This is what happened to me last year towards the beginning of the year. You add the spiritual practice to your life, and you're going good for a little while, and then things start going wrong, right? Or quote unquote wrong, and you start going through all this other stuff, and oh, where was I going? Damn it, it happened again. I hate it when that happens. Hang on. My brain, I swear. I don't know if it has to do with like non-linear time kind of living, like I'm not organized enough or what, but let's see. Things start falling apart.
Well, you were talking about that, having that foundation of a spiritual practice in place, rather than trying to throw necessarily bits and pieces of a spiritual practice randomly at different events.
Right. Well, and and you got to have like things that work for you that you can build on. So for me, it started with yoga and meditation, and I've continued that, and that's every time I, get out of it or fall off the wagon or whatever, then I go back to yoga and meditation because it's easy to start back up, I don't think that's what I was going to say, though. I don't know.
Well, the thing that brought up for me to say as a fair warning or a reminder, the point of a spiritual practice is to clear stuff out of our consciousness. So actually engaging in a spiritual practice will bring up stuff.
Yeah.
There will be things that we are not aware of that are operating in our conscious mind, our subconscious, and we start a spiritual practice and those will come to the surface. Now, they've always been impacting us, we just haven't been aware of it.
Right.
When we engage in the spiritual practice, we're going to start becoming aware of it. And that can sometimes feel like, oh my God, I started this meditation practice and my life is getting worse. This isn't what was supposed to happen. It's not that your life is getting worse. It's that you're seeing how bad it already was.
Yeah, and it's purging. It's bringing everything to the surface.
Which is great news. When you understand that that's what's happening, oh, this is coming to the surface. It's always been inside of me, but it's coming to the surface now so I can get rid of it so it doesn't impact me anymore. Then it's a celebration rather than lamenting of, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Oh, this is happening to me so I can get rid of it. Yes!
Yeah, exactly. Good riddance. All right. Well, yeah, so I don't know if we want to necessarily get into this one. I'm kind of curious about what you have to add about a correlation between spiritual awakening and addiction recovery, because that seems to be kind of a hand-in-hand sort of journey. My journey started with quitting alcohol, or cutting way back, because for about 5 or 6 years there I was drinking every day, every single day. So not good. I gained about 100 to 120 pounds. I was just sitting around all day. I was beaten up by life. I had already survived domestic violence. I had 3 kids. I was trying to make things work, and it wasn't doing it for me. I just was not having any luck. So I knew at some point, it just really hit me. I can't be this way to myself anymore. So I started doing the yoga and meditation and taking better care of myself and going for walks and, and everything started falling apart after that. And I want to say that a part of the reason why things tend to fall away, I guess, because falling apart still sounds so negative. You know what I mean? It's not like it was a terrible thing. It all serves a purpose, Yeah, there's some difficult times in there, but it all serves a purpose. What are you learning from it, But do you think that there is a correlation, or is that just something that I might be seeing because of my own experiences?
Well, so I'll say everything with the caveat that I have never gone through addiction. So I cannot speak from the perspective of somebody who really knows what they're talking about in that regard. But it seems to me that that addictive behaviors and the use of things like drugs and alcohol, or food or sex or whatever it might be, are ways to not look at the pain that we're experiencing. And that when we begin to look at spiritual practices, when we begin to take the really bold step of looking at ourselves and really seeing where we are, really seeing the thoughts we're thinking, the things we're doing, and taking ownership of those, that once we start to look at the things that we're trying to numb, we can start addressing those and we can start clearing those rather than having to numb them out. So I would assume, knowing what little I know about the 12-step process and all of that, that really having a spiritual component is such an important part of the recovery process, because it encourages us to look at our stuff rather than shutting our stuff down and covering it up with whatever the addiction is, or the choice to do instead, the way that we cover up and don't look at ourselves and what's right in front of us to do.
Right.
It's also, it's also a great, when you start to come into the idea, which is a big idea, if from a spiritual perspective, God is all there is. Spirit, the universe, life, whatever term you want to use, that's the only thing. It's unconditional love. It's perfect and whole, complete in every way, shape, and form. It's joyous. It's abundant. It's all of these wonderful, beautiful things. And as the only thing that there is, it has to be what we are. And even though we often do not feel anywhere close to that, beginning to get the idea that the power that created the universe created me because I was necessary, by evidence of the fact that I'm here, that can be very helpful in finding a little bit of self-worth, finding a little bit more value in who we are, and then that encouraging us to do the work of looking at, if this is the truth, then where am I not aligning with the truth? Where are my thoughts off base, and how can I lovingly forgive those beliefs and those thoughts and those judgments and replace them with something that's more aligned with the truth of Spirit being all there is and therefore existing as me.
Right. Spirit being all there is. And that leads us to number 6. Woohoo! And actually, we kind of already touched on consciousness, and I even brought up the quantum physics thing already. So I think, is there anything else that you would want to elaborate on about consciousness? In your book, it says something really cool. It says, if the goal of a spiritual practice is complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and your consciousness creates your experience, then any discord you experience is a direct result of your consciousness. And then it says, knowing how consciousness works is vital in your spiritual work, because changing consciousness is your spiritual work. I absolutely love that. That's what I'm talking about with the, clarity and being concise. That's probably one of the best sums up everything descriptions about consciousness I've ever read. So
Thank you.
That was a pretty cool little thing to come across. I had to share it on Facebook and everything already.
Awesome. So I would say another way to look at consciousness is this. Like if you have a big bucket, and let's say it's a glass bucket so you can see through the bucket. Every thought you've ever had gets dropped in that bucket. Every feeling, every experience, every belief, all of that from the beginning of your existence goes in this bucket. Now you try to look through that bucket, and you've got to see through all of these different thoughts and feelings and beliefs, and that's going to color what you're seeing. So when we're looking out at the world, we're never seeing the world exactly as it is. We're seeing the world through all of the thoughts, feelings, actions, and beliefs that we have ever done in our entire existence.
Right.
Sounds really big, right? But it's good to understand that that's how consciousness works. It's the lens through which we view everything in our experience. So when we start to clean off that lens, just like a window, if a window is really dirty, you're going to look through it and not be able to see too clearly. When you wash that window, you're going to get to see a lot more clearly. You're going to get a better picture of what's actually happening. So this spiritual growth work is about clearing out that consciousness bucket. Now, we can never really clear the bucket. It's everything always stays in there, but it's the preponderance of what we have in there. So if we've got 100 negative thoughts in our consciousness bucket, and that's it, then we're going to see the world in a pretty negative light.
Right.
But if we're doing this spiritual growth work, and we intentionally put 50,000 positive thoughts in our consciousness bucket, and stop putting in the negative thoughts, those 100 negative thoughts are going to make no difference in what we see, because the overwhelming majority of what we've got, what's the word I'm looking for? See, now you're rubbing off on me.
Oh no!
The predominant thought is what's going to lead the way. So if we've got the predominant thing in our consciousness bucket being those positive experiences and that positive way of looking at the world, then that's going to shift how we see things. It's going to give us a broader perspective. And eventually they cancel each other out, right? Like if you've got 100 negative thoughts and 100 positive thoughts, then you're at neutral.
Right. Yeah.
Right. As we begin to put consciously into our consciousness bucket that which we want to experience, then they eventually outweigh the other, and we get to a place where we start seeing clearer and start seeing a more loving experience, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that within my own life, just with the whole redefining love thing. My entire experience with people has changed, and then you start seeing the comparisons, like the extremes, so, and it's because you see what you seek, right? So what started happening for me was I started saying, okay, well, what is loving and what is not loving? And I did this for myself, the way I was treating myself and thinking about myself, as well as taking other people and their behaviors into consideration. So it wasn't just like, you don't love me, so I'm gonna leave. You know what I mean? Like, you don't love me the way. It wasn't like a projecting, blaming kind of thing. It was literally, I knew that I didn't know what love really was, what it really looked like, But then life starts giving you all these little examples, and it's kind of cool. I can't remember what the main point of that was, but, that kind of leads really well to let's talk about deep introspection. Tell me about that and how that might help people.
Yeah, so one of the wonderful, unique things about being human is that we can think about what we think about. So deep introspection is you just gave a great example of it, really, in saying, okay, my definition of what love is doesn't work. What is love? I don't know what love is. How am I treating myself? Am I treating myself in a loving way? What are the things that I'm doing that are unkind to myself? What are the things that I'm doing that I'm kind? So being willing to do that self-exploration. And part of that is being kind of ruthless with ourselves. And not in a negative way, not in a mean way, but in really seeing and accepting and owning what we're doing with ourselves and to ourselves. So, if you've got a habit of saying, oh, well, of course that didn't work out, you don't deserve nice things. And then you just say, oh, no, that's not true. I don't really think that. I don't really think that thought. I don't really think that thought. No, that's not really. No.
But then you're focusing on it.
Right. But instead, if you say, oh, I think that thought, part of me believes that I'm worthless. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Why do I believe I'm worthless, and what do I want to believe instead? In fact, I don't even need to look at why I believe I'm worthless. I just need to recognize that I do have that belief in my consciousness somewhere that I believe I'm worthless, and now I can start working on changing it. Yeah. I can start forgiving myself for buying into the misbelief that I'm worthless, and recognizing that the truth of who I am as an expression of spirit is so valuable that there's no way to put any sort of physical world tag of value on it. And start doing the little baby steps to say, I'm going to change. I got to change this belief. I got to change this belief because it's not serving me. But if you don't own it, you can't change it.
Right.
So that deep introspection work. Okay, this is my experience. Why is this my experience? This is not my experience because something in the outside world happened to me. This is my experience because of how I am relating to what happened to me. Mm-hmm. So how do I want to relate to it? What about the way I'm relating to this experience is creating the feeling of upset, of discomfort, of sadness, of whatever it might be? Oh, that's how I'm relating to this. Okay, what if that is true? What is not true? Do I need more information? How can I reframe this into something that's actually empowering? Asking ourselves these questions, looking at and taking ownership of the fact that it's our consciousness that creates our experience, and not blaming anybody or anything else. As soon as we are willing to do that and look deeply, that's that deep introspection work. And we may find, I was doing some introspection work not too long ago, and I came across something that was 35 years old.
Oh, wow.
That I've been carrying around for about 35 years that I had no idea was still impacting me. Yeah. And I was pretty young when it happened because I'm not that much older than 35. But doing that, it was because I was willing to really look at, okay, I'm having this experience. Why am I having this experience? What am I thinking about? How am I relating to this? Where have I felt this feeling before? How far back in my memory can I go? And find something that felt similar. What was happening at the time? What was I thinking about then? What did I make that experience mean? And now, from my perspective of all these years later, having this grown consciousness, this adult experience, this capability that I didn't have back then, how do I want to reframe what that experience was, put a new meaning on it that's empowering, and forgive those old judgments? That's the deep introspection work that we're really called to, and it takes a toolbox of tools that we can use, and church-free spirituality really provides a great foundation of those tools. There's a whole lot more that I couldn't go into in one book, but just the foundational practices in that book will do so much in terms of getting us back to center and helping to start doing that deep introspection work.
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, is releasing and healing yourself from whatever you might be carrying around with you, that introspection work. I read this one, it sounds very similar to what you were just describing about something from childhood, from early childhood. I read another article couple months ago probably about working with healing your inner child that was a very similar, and just going back and kind of being loving to yourself, and in the memory maybe talking to your child self. I mean, I've never done that type of healing work myself yet that I'm consciously aware of. It could be happening on another level, but I am very aware of, say, for example, certain things that would perpetuate abandonment issues, for example, because I was a preemie, and so I was in the hospital separated from my mom from birth. And so that created this, trauma. It's not anybody's fault. It's not anything to feel resentful about or anything like that. But being aware of that helped me realize that there were a couple other instances when I was a little child where I thought that I had gotten left somewhere. And I freaked out screaming and running and just, like, oh my gosh, so scared. But then as I grew older and I kind of kept that in mind and I remembered freaking out, I was like, I was already thinking as a child, well, I got to stop that. That's not going to be any good. You know what I mean? So shortly after that, I wanted to like walk into the classroom by myself and stuff, so I rebel against things that hold me back, like naturally. So I love the deep introspection work that you talked about. I love the book so far. I'm probably around chapter 6 or 7. So I'm getting there. I'll get through it. I think that brings us to about being out of time. But, thank you so much for being here with me today, Ben. I appreciate you. I appreciate your work. I think it's really fantastic that you're sharing and your video series is really good too. So if you guys want some more, I guess, details or what have you, Mr. Jamison has a YouTube channel and a YouTube video series about church-free spirituality where he kind of goes into more detail and discusses some of the ins and outs and some of the discerning kind of subtle details that we need to know in order to create our best practice. So I look forward to finishing your book. Thank you again so much for being here. Is there anything that you would want to add in closing that you think is important for people to know?
Sure, just a couple quick things. One is you can also find that video series as well as a link to buy the book on my website, which is benjamison.com, which Jamison for Jamison. You can also sign up for my mailing list there, and I don't email out a whole lot. But what you'll get when you do that is an excerpt from the book, so you can really get a good sense of what the book is like, as well as a download of a 45-minute talk that I did a couple years ago on some basic tools of conscious co-creation. So that'll just be some good ways for you to start really digging into and thinking about a spiritual practice right up front. So that's the best way to get in touch with me and learn more. But to put it back on you again, I would say that you are amazing, whether you feel it or not. That from the spiritual perspective of life, the only thing existing anywhere is unconditional love. We do a lot of good to cover it up, and we don't experience it very often. But at the core of your being, all you are is unconditional love. And so I honor you for being that, and I am so grateful that you are here on this wonderful planet, even though, again, sometimes it seems dramatic. It is a beautiful school where we get to learn about ourselves and about life and about how we can share and express love. And so I bless you and appreciate you, and I'm so glad that I got to connect with you. And thank you, Jen, for having me on your show.
All right, awesome, perfect. I think that's fantastic, and I think that's a great place to close. Thank you so much. I will hopefully talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jen. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much for watching. No matter where you are on your journey, please take good care of yourself from within on all levels. If you'd like more guidance, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or visit www.innerworkcoaching.life for more content or to apply for one-on-one coaching. With unconditional love and light, I wish you an amazing week, and I hope to see you again for my next video. Namaste.